Hey guys, Brent Hull, Wednesday design video. Got a blocking and tackling video. Traditional designs, getting back to the basics. Come join me. Okay guys, so this is the house in Vermont. You're seeing that it's kind of mountainized or something. Doesn't look like a mountain house, but you know, here's the fixes showing a couple different variations, showing them some, you know, a shed dormer over here, showing a couple split dormers there, but certainly playing around with that entry, which is kind of a mess. This is the entry close up. They were trying to get light inside the entry, right? They were trying to improve the light. Not the best way of doing it, and they've got this kind of hi-hat disease going on the dormers as well. And they've got pork chop ends, but here's an example of, and you'll see it in this window close up, because they used cheap windows originally, there's no room for trim. And so these windows, just as they look in these openings right here, look cheap. They look like mobile home windows. There's no humph to them. There's nothing there. And so the opportunity then is to kind of improve this house and kind of find the details, and really just looking at the details. If you'll just look at this side of the house, look at this gable end, okay? And really all I'm doing is I've split the windows, I've changed the size, okay? I've made them divided lights, and I've fixed the gable end returns. So you don't have pork chop ends, you have gable end returns, but the siding's fine. They've actually got a water table in there, that's fine. But splitting the windows and changing the sizes, because that window right there is a square, okay? And that square is kind of a bad size for a window. Windows from the 20s and 30s are a 3x5, which is the golden ratio, right? You go to another period, go to an earlier period, and they're a 1-to-2 relationship. 1 width wide, 2 width tall, right? And so you end up seeing this in all these classical pattern books and things like that, them using these proportions. And to go with the square, right, really messes up your window, because then you split it for a divided light, and you end up with 2 horizontal rectangles. And those horizontal rectangles make it look flat and long. And so going with a 6/6 3x5 design with the 6/6 lights, all of a sudden all my little lights are now tall little rectangles like this. They look real pretty because they lift your eye up. Notice too, what I've done here is I'm figuring the floors down here, that window's too high. Remember, I like my traditional windows right about the 28 or 32 level. And so when I'm placing these windows on this house and I'm fixing these windows, right, I'm trying to get them not only the right size, but the right height off the floor, so that any trim that goes on in the inside, if they put a wainscot or something else in there, it ties into the windowsill of the window. This to me is night and day, okay? This to me is like, well, duh, that looks so much better. Well, why does it look better? All I did was split the windows and fix the gable end returns, and I think that looks charming and timeless, right? Whereas this looks dated and mobile home. Just 2 quick little things there, and already this is so much better. If we go over here, and I know that they, because of the way they've done that they want more light in their entry. So naturally what I'm doing is I'm fixing the side lights here so that they are more traditional, right? In this case, they've split that side light almost in half with a really tall panel, then a very short window. I've gone back to this more traditional design. In fact, I've lowered it way down, but the side lights should match the door. And I've got these lights going up either side, and I've got a transom light using bullseye glass. And so I'm using kind of as much light as I can get into her, but still giving them a more traditional pediment. Over here, I played with it a little bit differently and gave them a different pediment with a fan light, right? And so there's a couple different ways to play this. If they wanted a little more federal, a little more dainty, then I can go with these leaded glass side lights and a fan light. If they want something a little bit more older colonial, we go with the bullseye glass. I've got a 6-panel door, but I've taken out those panels and put glass in there because I know it's dark in there. I know they're trying to solve that. Fixing the windows. Again, all I'm doing is I'm splitting those windows and making them a proper size. And then of course, dormers. I mean, just the night and day between those dormers, because all I'm doing is I've just changed this hat on top of there. There's no reason for you to build that hat unless you want a lot of room in those upstairs rooms. What I'm doing is all I've done is I've said, look, we don't need that because they've got those stupid, they've basically framed the dormers out. This is a real problem that people have with dormers. They treat dormers like they're the end of the house. So they have treated this and they've framed this dormer like it's the end of this house. Okay, because the proportion of those gable end returns are the same size as these ones, right? And so now the reason those dormers look ginormous and too big is because they're framed like the rest of the house. There is a proportion and scale that goes on with the overhang and everything else on here that works better because it's, 16 feet in the air. This, because it's so small, makes it look like you've got a huge ball cap on a baby, right? It just doesn't work. And so I've reduced the scale of those dormer roofs so that they match the scale of the size of this dormer. That is a real quick trick, guys, that makes sure your framers, when they're framing out the house, aren't framing it like they're framing the rest of the house, because the overhangs changed and everything else changed. So I've fixed those dormers. I've separated the windows. Traditional windows had weight pockets. So just like the windows I'm looking at there, or windows right here, there's a weight pocket. There's a 5 or 6 inch spacer in between windows because that's where the weights went. So traditional windows, you're used to seeing them if they're paired together as this kind of center weight pocket. You can't pair windows together like that. They're cheap windows. They're post 1980 windows that don't have any weights in the pockets and they look silly. And then the last thing I did was I fixed this garage. Because you approach this house from this way, there's a real opportunity, and you can see that I've played up the garage aspect on this house because now it looks just like the rest of the house. But by changing the siding to a board and batten siding, by putting a little cupola up there, by changing the windows to a smaller window, I'm conveying the fact that this was a barn, that now this house has tradition and a story and a narrative that makes sense. So now you're driving up and you're seeing a barn. If you look at these doors, they got the traditional panel door system. I've gone back with a carriage style door to make it look like an old barn. And so I've changed the windows to these 3 smaller windows where cows might have sat in their stall and looked out windows, as opposed to the way, and I've gone with the board and batten siding. So not a huge change there. Changed the garage doors, changed the siding, and changed the window layout. And all of a sudden, this looks like a real charming little addition to this house, a little charming additive to this traditional house, and it casts a beautiful story. It's a fun story. This is the house you want to go into. It's interesting. There looks like neat opportunity inside. So fixing this house really gets down to that blocking and tackling, guys. Fixing all of the details on this house that are new house, okay? Those windows that are paired together, the windows without divided lights, the dormers with the big hats, right? Playing around, and the gable end returns, playing around with the few details really can dramatically make a big difference in this house. Let me know what you guys think.